Hello, everyone, and welcome to tonight's school committee meeting. Mike Mazzoni, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, please?
Absolutely. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have consent agenda minutes from January 26, 2017, and the oath to bills and payroll.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the consent agenda? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. All right. There are two sections on our agenda for interested citizens. This is the first one. Seeing none. Literally seeing none. Let's actually go to presentation, and we'll get Katie Bonner to talk about the request for permission to take the robotics team out of state. Within the galaxy, though?
Not this time. I'm here on behalf of the Littleton robotics team. In general, they like to send students to do all of these presentations and requests. But they only have until midnight on Tuesday to finish everything about the robot, so every hour, every minute counts right now, so they're all at the high school. So I am requesting permission for 2 out-of-state overnight field trips for Littleton robotics team for the March competitions. The first is the Granite State District competition at Windham High School in Windham, New Hampshire, the weekend of March 3rd. The second is the Southern New Hampshire District competition at Bedford High School in Bedford, New Hampshire, the weekend of March 24th. So they're planning to take a core team up Friday night to do all the setup and get the station set up, and then the rest of the team will come on Saturday for competitions that go through Saturday and Sunday.
Okay. You have hotels taken care of? And
Hotels are taken care of, transportation is taken care of
adult
with
supervision?
parents. Yep. We have official mentor chaperones, plus many of the parents will be coming with their students as well.
Dr. Harrington's not here. Do we actually have staff, teaching staff that are going as part of this? So it's all parental support? Okay. So I just wanted to clarify and make sure that we're good. I'm not worried about it. I just wanted to know if we were going to actually have any staff on hand.
No, there won't be actual staff on.
Unless they're there to root in the stands.
Mm-hmm. These events are open to the public. We would love to see everybody show up.
Is there a per student charge for the trip? Or
Yes, Zach Temple and Dee Clark.
is there a fee that's
Oh.
on the trip?
No,
the hotels or, like how's the
Did they just
covering
pay
their-
for it?
everybody's paying for their own hotel room. It's split 4 students to a room.
Okay.
Yeah. Or family rooms if parents are staying
Are you
overnight.
taking private vehicles? Or
Yeah,
bus?
private vehicles.
No student drivers?
I don't believe so, no.
That's it.
think
Yes,
parents.
there are no student drivers. Okay.
Okay.
And they're borrowing our trailers or all the equipment up with.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Wyndham and Bedford are both well within striking distance of it. You could go farther away and still be in Massachusetts.
Great.
So could I just request the administration review all the procedures for, no drivers and things like that with
Sure.
them before?
We can certainly
Going
have
on.
Dr. Harrington.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. All right, any other questions? All right, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the first robotics team's request for an out-of-state field trip for the dates of March 3rd to March 5th to Windham, New Hampshire, and March 24th to 26th in Bedford, New Hampshire.
Second that motion.
The motion is made and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Right.
Opposed? None. All right, wish them
Thank
luck.
you. Hopefully we'll be back in April for the next round of
We
competitions.
heard some big talk here the other night.
I know.
It's time to start putting their money where their mouth is. Or put their
Well,
money where
apparently
their
we
mouth
have
is.
photos of the robot.
Cool.
So there's
That's
4, so
excellent.
I'll go through. Do you want to talk about it at all? Or you want me
I
to go through?
can try.
So, wow.
So that piece on top, I believe, is the, down here at the bottom is where they're scooping in the wiffle ball fuel, and then they have to carry it up to the top, and out the top is the shooter that's going to put it into the basket. That's the wiring and programming. This past week has been all about that wiring and getting it live.
And I had the video from a couple of weeks ago, if you want to refresh from
Yeah,
that basic
it's good.
mock-up video.
It
you
was
can-
very good.
Yeah.
Do they know if they get in trouble, which wire to cut?
Blue wire.
It's, yeah. It's come together really quickly, and they're doing a great job with it.
Awesome. How's the weather? Is the weather putting behind the curve at all, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, snow days are tough
yeah.
to make up for, really tough.
I'll second that.
I get all of the emails because I'm like a low-key member of the team. It's just I've had a lot of other things going on. And Dee, who's one of the mentors, she writes all of the emails. And so like when there's a snow day, I'll get an email and it's like, I'm sorry guys, but school's canceled and I can't get us into the building. We'll make it up. It's okay.
Yeah, each snow day is about 6 hours of time that's lost.
Wow. You want me to run that again?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, good luck
Thank
here.
you.
Thank you. Tell the kids good luck on our behalf.
Exciting.
All right, now we'll move back up to recognition. We have heard from Olivia, but we'll hear from her again.
Sounds good. Okay. Kindergarten registration was last Wednesday, so yesterday. The spelling bee was last week, and I heard it was a lot of fun for all of the participants. The high school did their screening of How to Succeed 10 days ago. And Global Play Day was a lot of fun, as I heard from my sister and all of her friends.
Yep.
That's awesome.
All right. What else do we have?
LHS presentation, the most likely to succeed. I'm really glad the high school brought that to the staff and the public. And as we mentioned earlier, it's a focus of our leadership team this year, and I'm going to recommend, as long as you would like to, for part of our retreat this summer, read the book, Most Likely to Succeed. And there's a lot of good information in there, and it should really tie quite nicely into determining our vision for the future out to 2025, or 2020 vision, but we should now be looking at 2025. And it's, if you haven't already read the book or seen the documentary, it really is thought-provoking, and it's a perfect time for us to sit back and reflect in terms of how we've successfully achieved actually virtually all of our mandates in our strategic plan. It doesn't mean that they're not continuous. Now we need to think about what should education look like in the future in terms of our kids being prepared, the whole child being prepared, and having those skill sets that are so essential to being successful in an innovative economy or innovative society. So I'm looking forward to that discussion, as long as you're on board with reading the book. Certainly order copies in, and I'll hide them in my office until the end of June. How's that?
Definitely.
Does that sound all right?
Yeah, definitely.
Perfect. Global Play Day, it was such a great day. Our kids they're so creative. You know, if they're given that opportunity to think and work in teams and develop something, it's amazing what they can come up with. They were super excited, happy, didn't lose their energy, which was really kind of funny, because by the end of the day, the teachers were ready to go home. And they weren't. I mean, they were just full of
Playing
energy.
is harder than
And
teaching.
it was just great to see. I had one student come up to me at Russell Street School and thank me for supporting Global Play Day, and they just simply said, we should have done this about 10 years ago. So it was great. I'd like to thank the staff for jumping on board. It's always that delicate balance, as we talk about a lot, about the world of academia and standardized tests, as opposed to concentrating on developing the whole child. I think that was one more indication as a district that we are accountability-based, but we also appreciate the importance of spending time developing the whole child. So I was very pleased to be witness to that happening, not only that day, but every time I go into a school, I see something that makes me smile in terms of how well-rounded our education is for our students. Shaker Lane Winterfest, that is such a wonderful event, and it is just packed with parents and kids, and this year again they raised around $11,000. Now, I haven't won anything for the last 2 years, so I need to
I
be
didn't win a lot
talking to
this
somebody
year.
else before I arrive, or doing something,
Well,
buying a lucky dollar.
Rich, how
or
many
something.
Shaker Lane Winterfest do you have under your belt? I mean, you could say all of them.
All of them, yes. I think this might be the
10th or 11th. The first one was playing bingo and having hot chocolate. And
It's evolved since then.
Wow.
Maybe with a new regime change, Kelly, your luck will change.
Or win one time?
Buy more tickets.
Maybe.
I did win, I
Yeah, there's a-
can't complain.
don't
I
wanna-
won Patriot tickets 3 years ago.
You did?
And that was an awesome win. So, I have to be humble here. Say that my turn will eventually happen.
I won
again.
earrings this year.
How come you didn't wear them? And the LHS senior athletes signing national letters of intent. In your package, we have a picture of our seniors that signed. And, well, thank you. And just give me 2 seconds.
Can you read that?
Griffin Shoemaker, Aaron Rocker,
Eric Walker.
Eric Rocker, maybe I can't read this. Maybe enlarge it a bit. There you go.
Will Brzezinski.
Will Brzezinski and Shannon Rorden and Kayla Nixon. Congratulations to all 5 students who were offered opportunities to play for universities and colleges.
This is
Quite
actually deep. These kids are all going Division II. If you're going Division I or Division II, there is a more formal process for declaring. There'll be other athletes that are looking to go Division III, which is a little bit more informal. But it is a tribute to the fact that 5 athletes are going Division II, and there will be more going Division III for a school our size. While that's not the primary driver for our interscholastic sports program, it is a reflection of how dedicated the kids are, how good the coaching they receive is. Mike Lynn is on record as calling this the golden age of Littleton athletics. It's a period that he would probably say has been about the last 8 to 10 years. He said the level of play has gone way up. So the amount of the commitment from the athletes has also gone way up. And the support they receive in the community from the time they're kids, because this doesn't happen in high school, is really, we're a strong town with a lot of broad programming, and this is a reflection in one aspect of it, of what can happen when you are committed like that. So.
Excellent. Great sign of success. And the high school, I'm very pleased to announce that the high school was awarded with the 7th Annual AP District Honor Roll Award. And it's awarded to schools that increase not only the AP average on the courses that we offer, but also the number of students that take advanced placement courses. This is, in the past 6 years, I believe this is our 3rd time that we've been honored with this award. So congratulations, Dr. Harrington, and the staff and students. Very well done.
Again, just another indicator, like, we're not striving to have kids get there, but the fact you put the framework in place and, they make the commitment, and this is what can happen when you challenge them. So, just another example of a different.
We'll be preparing a press release to go out next week.
Oh, excellent. Next recognition, our district-wide band concert. We've done that for a few years, and what a treat to go and watch the concert. 200, and John was 257?
267?
267 students in total, grade 5 to 12 in our band program in the past 4 years.
Full house.
Mushroomed.
It should have been even better than they expected, because they got like 5 extra days to practice after getting snowed out last week.
I don't know if Hillary felt that way. But,
They didn't get that time if they left their instruments at school, though,
Oh.
like most of the high schoolers
See,
do.
they should have got with the robotics club, figured out how to break in for, let a robot
Give
not.
me any ideas.
Be careful what you're encouraging.
Pursuit of
That
excellence.
was all a joke.
But it was a wonderful performance, and it was packed. And the last selection where they had everybody playing together, it was so powerful. And so thank you to Mrs. Bridge and all the students and parents who support the program. And in terms of athletics, LHS boys hockey, 6-1 record in the Russell Conference. LHS girls hockey, as you know, our girls combined with Westford, they actually won the league title, so it was great to hear. Girls indoor track also won their first ever district Massachusetts championship. Again, lots of great news. Girls basketball won their league title. And I'd also like to give special thanks to Shannon Rorden and Kyla Nixon for helping out with the Council on Aging Valentine's Luncheon yesterday. No, it was Wednesday, on Wednesday. And I was greatly appreciated that they take time out of their busy day to come and represent the high school. So special thanks to them. And that brings me to the end of my acknowledgements.
All right, thank you. All right, next, we're going to have a discussion on old business, the school district enrollment report.
So, the last meeting we had, which seems like it was a long time ago, we talked about capacity, school capacity, et cetera, and the school committee had asked for a little more information. And some of this was in your package before. The first enrollment summary is just something that we do every month, so we can track our students on a monthly basis. We track them on a daily basis as well. And it gives you an idea of where we're at now. And you can take a look at the history back to 2014. A pretty standardized document that we've seen many times. And if I go, and at the bottom, it also takes a look at our Tigers Den enrollment, which is increasing every year. A real credit to the program, and very proud of the Tigers Den program. The next slide teases data out a little more for you. It's based on our October 1st enrollment summary, and it takes a look at enrollment in each school and total enrollment with and without school choice. So it gives you an idea of what's happened over time, and we have increased, as you can see there. We've also increased the number of school choice students that we have in our district, which has helped immensely during the budget to help fund the programs that we enjoy within our schools. So gives you a better idea. We haven't had a huge increase in enrollment over that 6-year period, but we certainly haven't declined. In this day and age, that's a pretty powerful thing to be able to say, because in most areas, you're not experiencing growth, you're experiencing decline. We're an exception to the rule, and not dissimilar to many of the towns along the 495 corridor. They're all growing. Any questions on that slide? And the next part of the agenda deals with taking a look at school capacity. And I've mentioned before that when we were trying to figure out how to do this in a meaningful way, we really had to take a look at our current structure and then take a look at what would happen as our enrollment increased through time. So that's what we've done here. The principals had an opportunity to be a little creative, and I didn't give them a template. So they've done a few different things. The themes are the same, though. And you can see from the pages that we put in, we don't have a lot of extra space in our schools. And that's not a bad thing. Any school that was built 1995 and beyond, they were very, very specific about square footage and also calculated square footage according to the age of the student. So they really didn't plan for expansion when those schools were built, unless there was a clear indication that the enrollment was going to expand, but most people didn't think that would happen. So we can be somewhat creative, but we're very limited, and I think, Mr. Chairman, maybe it'd be, if it's all right with you, to have each principal talk about what they've done. That might be helpful. So we'll start with Shaker Lane, Principal Ferris.
Good evening, everyone. I think what you have in front of you is pretty clear. I do have to say that I think that we do pretty well with space utilization at all of our schools, but at Shaker Lane, of course. The class sizes are there in front of you, and then in the second group, you see the current Shaker Lane configuration. 22 of our rooms right now are used as grade-level classrooms, preschool through grade 2. There are currently 5 kindergarten rooms, 1 K transitional room, kindergarten transitional room, 4 rooms that are used for preschool, 6 for first grade, 6 for second grade. And then the other uses of the rooms are listed below. The bottom 3 rooms that you see, the room that I refer to as a reading room, music room, and one of the bedrooms, those aren't full-size classrooms. They're about a third to a half the size of what a regular classroom would be. So those rooms, if we were to be looking at spaces, could never be used as classrooms and are really only functional for what they're being used for right now. It was somewhat fortuitous. One of the things I said in planning for the future in FY '18 is there was no anticipation of adding additional sections, and I'm not saying that there would be, but somewhat fortuitous that we didn't do this a couple of weeks ago, because we did have, as Olivia mentioned, kindergarten registration yesterday, and we had 115 students register for kindergarten. Usually, in my history, this time of the year, we've had anywhere between 85 and 90 register for kindergarten, so some flags are going off. Out of those 115, 19 of them were students who were not on the census, so they were what we refer to as walk-ins. That's also a relatively high number. We had 12 people who didn't show, but we know that 5 of them are coming for sure. We sent out letters to all those families today. So we're on top of that, which means, our enrollment right now for kindergarten could look at 120 without any move-ins. So I just wanted to put that out there so everybody was aware that that is new news and new information that wasn't available before. So I'm glad I didn't stand up here 2 weeks ago and say, everything's hunky-dory and wonderful. 'Cause
There's a reason why we waited.
yes, there was.
Yeah, and just so you
Not
know.
scheduling a snowstorm, but.
We work it in. We work
That
it in.
kind of time.
There is a reason, that reason is snow.
There is a statutory regulation that not dictates, but firmly recommends class size of the kindergarten level be restricted to 20 students. If you go over that.
25. Excuse me,
25?
I didn't mean to correct you, but it's
Okay.
25.
20.
Which we would be at
20 in other
24,
places,
right?
I've been 25 here. So it gives you an idea where, with the projected enrollment, we would be short one teacher. And this was a real surprise, because we talk about this all year, and we collect data from various sources, and I'm still perplexed. I don't know where the 25 came from. They haven't been in our office at all, and they were recorded in no other agency that we deal with, so it was a real surprise to us.
And oftentimes, people will contact the school when they're getting ready to move, and they have a child who's, 3 or 4 years old, and they want to come in for a tour, but there hasn't been a heightened number of that either, so.
Can I just ask, in your current enrollment for this year, you're showing 124 in kindergarten?
Including transitional.
That includes some who were in the transitional class as
Okay.
well. Yeah.
Right.
And I'm not anticipating that we would have that model for next year. This year, the number of students going into transitional were lower than in other years, but we wanted to maintain the program and the integrity of the program because we felt it was an important resource. So we did a mixed kindergarten with older kindergarten students and transitional students being in there. But next year, we anticipate that transitional enrollment alone to be right around that 18 number, which is where it should be for that class.
So,
That just was confusing in
Right.
terms of the data that you give
I
us
understand.
in this.
Right.
Yeah, because I couldn't see where the extra teacher was needed. that-
So it sounds like it's not just a staffing issue of, hey, we need a new teacher, it's also where would that classroom be?
Well, yeah, it is. Which, leads me to the bottom part of that, neither one of which are exciting. Again, I need time to really try to look at this and work with the staff on it.
You've had 24 hours.
I have had 20, a little less than that, actually, because we didn't, well, actually, 24 hours. We finished at 7:30 last night. But I want to be able to discuss it with the staff, and I need to look at it as a whole building issue and not just a kindergarten issue. We don't have a lot of leeway. There's not a lot there. I mean, the 3 things that I listed, none of them are exciting
No.
alternatives. If you do things to an art room and don't have an art room, you change the curriculum because you're not able to do the same things as you are in a single space. Plus, you lose time. Right now, our art schedule goes, for example, 9 to 9:45, 9:45 to 10:30. Well, you have to start building in travel time for that person as well, so you lose something there. Certainly, you know, everything we've done in technology is very, very near and dear to everything that we've been doing at to a lot of what we've been doing at Shaker Lane the past several years, and we've invested a lot of training and time in that. Sped rooms are really important to what we do as well. But we need time as a school to be able to look at it and develop if it turns out that that's something that we're going to do, we need at times as a school to look at it.
I'm not asking to put you, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but when you go through that process, will you also be considering the transitional model and other models that are used by districts in our area?
We'll think about
Okay.
we'll look at everything.
So,
Be creative.
yeah, because there's a new shed they're building.
You should.
So,
Any other questions for
Nope.
Rich?
I actually just had one more. I'm sorry. The new students who are surprises, do you know if they tend to be from newer developments in town?
I don't, but I can find that out. We can easily, you know, we have all the addresses, we'll do an analysis of that.
And I'm not just talking
Wow.
the bigger developments like the 40B, but
Right, but-
also just any new house coming
New
online.
houses.
I think we have conversations at the budget subcommittee level about what are we expecting to happen in town over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And it would be nice to be able to look at what causes this now, because that could certainly give us an insight into. the
Connie's
next couple
putting it
years.
all into a spreadsheet. She worked on it today, so we'll be able to easily look at that.
And I guess one last thing, Rich, could you talk about your current number of teachers you have at each grade?
There are 6, well, I have 4 preschool teachers. 2 of those teachers teach the 5-day full day. 2 each have a morning session or an afternoon session. There are 6 second grade teachers, 6 first grade teachers, 5 kindergarten teachers, and then the kindergarten transitional teacher.
So when you're thinking about total enrollment, you have a good idea of, you know, where we would end up as the larger class.
Right.
Certainly not the largest class we've had, but.
No.
We should be in pretty good shape, as long as that doesn't mushroom to 140 of us. 120, 125, we should be okay after kindergarten.
Because they tend to, we have this higher staff levels have the next couple of grades. And they also, I think the class sizes tend to get a little bit smaller as they move through the system. So we're not looking, this isn't necessarily going to be a giant bubble class that goes to not just Shaker Lane, but also Russell Street.
As we've had in the past.
As
I
we
mean,
had a couple of years ago.
Right.
We had a second grade class once of 147 kids when I was there. That's the big bubble.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Russell Street School.
Good evening. As Rich said, I think these documents are pretty self-explanatory, so I don't want to read to folks. One of the things to think about when you think about school capacity is we're pretty lucky in Littleton that special educators and interventionists and all those folks have their own space, and that's really nice. It's one of the things that was noted when we had our coordinated program review, that our special education classrooms look exactly like general education classrooms, and that's not always the case. I came from a school that was built in 1962, and I had a physical therapist who worked in the hallway. And so there's lots of things you can do inside a school to make it work. What I tried to list here is the things that would be easy to do. Again, like Rich said, not ideal. Could we, move math and literacy together? Yes. Could we combine special educators? Yes. Do some things with cubicle walls, that kind of thing. And then at some point, there's a tipping point where you get to some of those things Rich talked about, where you start talking about special subjects, being mobile and intervention being mobile and not having a home base. And not only do I think that's not ideal for students, but it's not ideal for morale when you are having staff run around and not be able to be feeling anchored and prepared. But right now at Russell Street, we're in decent shape. We haven't had any of the surprises that they've had at Shaker Lane. Even with the teacher that we're attempting to budget for next year, I think we'll be okay for classroom space. And as I indicated here, we really could probably go one more classroom before we get to a place where we're doing things that are less palatable. Having said that, it's nice to have special educators in full classrooms, but that may not be a luxury that we have. So that's sort of where we're at. I'm happy to answer any questions on the document or beyond that.
I wanted to highlight in the FY19 and beyond, if we need to gain more classrooms at Russell Street, our options include reclaiming case programs, case classrooms, Tiger's Den 130 classroom. Is that a classroom that they use throughout the day just for storage and so they have a home base?
They don't use it all day. We use it with small group instruction for part of the day. Tiger's Den starts using it before the end of the day, though. That's where their staff meets and whatnot. So of all of the spaces that we have, that's probably the first one that we would talk about being able to reclaim. We don't obviously pick up any money like we do from the case leased classrooms. And there's, probably some flexibility there. Again, if Martha was here, Martha would tell you that, they're squeezed and they need all the space they have. So it's when there's one meatball on the table, everybody wants the last meatball. But that's probably the first room that I would recommend that we talk about if we needed to continue to expand. We do use it, like I said, throughout the day. It doesn't sit empty, but it is probably the less utilized space of the others that I mentioned in my document.
And Tiger's Den is a self-supporting program, and they have 200 plus, I think the number was 200 plus after school enrollment, which I think is huge. So they have a lot of options. What's the set office, the case set?
That's the assistive technology team for the case collaborative, and so they go out to different districts and do assistive technology evaluations and make recommendations for all the districts in the collaborative. So that and the case autism program both lease space at Russell Street.
So the autism classroom has students, all case students. Some of them might be from Littleton, some of them might be from Acton, Concord, etc. The office is just programmatic.
Yes,
staff.
and that's not a full classroom. The set office is, now, could it be a special educator's office and workspace? Maybe, but it couldn't be a classroom. The autism classroom is a full-size classroom.
So you would be looking at, and again, this is a couple of years down the road, so we're not looking to make any decisions now, but you could be looking at that office, because it doesn't serve any students right now. We certainly would lose the offset from case, and we would see that increase in our case billing, but we wouldn't see a decrease in our direct services to students besides that billing differential. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's a fair thing to say. Some of the logistical pieces that come into play there that's on the top floor all the way at the end of the fifth grade wing. So if you put a special educator there other than fifth grade, it's way, you know what I mean? But as we start to be squeezed, you can only squeeze the balloon so many ways. So yes, I think that's a fair thing to say, that students are not serviced out of that space, and that's a space that we hypothetically could either have an interventionist or a special educator have an office and a place to work with children, for sure.
Do we think this is a permanent increase in our total capacity?
Can you clarify the question?
I guess that's a better question for you.
Could you kind of rephrase
Sure.
it?
So are we expecting that this is another couple of bubble classes, or are we expecting that this was going to be an issue that we're going to be talking about every 2 to 3 years for the next 10 to 15 years?
That's a really tough one to answer at this point in
I
time,
thought so.
Alex. I mean, this 25 students that were a surprise went completely away from our projections. So I'm not sure. I mean, I can just talk from my own experience.
Actually, let's hold on for that for a second. Let's get to the end of the presentations
Sure, that's a
by
bigger
the
question.
principals, and I think we can have a more general discussion about where we think we want to do with this information. I think that's a great question to think about, because I think there's a lot of worry in the community that in the assumption that it's going up. And that's not necessarily going to be the case. It might go up for a while, and then it might level, and then it might even decrease. There's a lot of moving pieces to the models when we try to project, and it's not us. It's, we're looking at different models, but let's leave that, we'll talk about
I have my
that.
perspectives on that also, so.
Yeah.
When we design these, we design them with the idea of, if it continued to grow, what could
Right,
we do
and that's
before
what
we
we
bust
wanted.
it at the seams?
Right, we need to know ultimately what our capacity is. Then we can figure out, or try to figure out, how close are we? When do we think we're gonna tip? And if we did tip, what would we do?
So, I don't want to hog if you guys got a question over there. So I was looking at is roughly, you know, with your 6 classroom configuration now, and then particularly adding at the 4th grade, it puts you at like 138, 140, which looks consistent with what we're seeing for the current enrollments coming in.
Correct.
Kind of thing there, even with the class of 120 plus 18, that gets you still a few years as that one slides down through.
Right.
We did the same thing, we had that group of 140 that came through.
But I mean, it looks like we're
around
consistently getting closer to 130 size grades, the newer grades as we, you know, I think our days of 100 in classes is past for a while, but.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, from my perspective, grades 3, 4, and 5, our class size would be 22 or lower. I put 23 here because we've been able to get back down to 23 with the positions we've added.
Yep.
And my goal would be if we are able to add a position next year, that we're, you know, looking at that 22, 23 number. When I got here, because of the cuts that we had
Yep.
lost, we were closer to 24, 25, you know, in different grades. And while that's doable, I think you do start to lose something at that point.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you, Scott.
Thanks.
In the middle school.
My chart is pretty similar. You can see in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, we have 5 core teachers per grade. And I tried to look at the additional spaces closed in the building. So for 6th grade, our additional spaces are a full-size classroom, a tech lab, and a special education classroom in the 6th grade wing. There's currently 126 students in grade 6. In grade 7, same thing. We have 5 core teachers in grade 7. The additional spaces in the 7th grade wing are a full-size music room and a special education classroom. There's 102 students currently in grade 7. Grade 8, same thing, 5 core teachers. The additional spaces there are 2 special education classrooms, academic support center, full-size classroom, and a fairly large math lab room that would also work if we had additional students. There's 122 students in grade 8 currently. On the bottom of the page, I just tried to show a projection going forward of where we would be when adding students, with the 350 students currently divided evenly between the 15 teachers. The average is 23 per class. It's really 25, 20, and 24 in 6th, 7th, and 8th, but the average is 23. If we added 10 more students and dispersed them equally, we'd be at 24. 25 more students dispersed equally would put each class at 25 students. We'd have to have 40 more students dispersed equally to get up to 26, and then 55 students would make it 27.
Questions?
So, yeah, yours is a little different because of the way, the teaching model, right, in terms of the way that it's there. So again, if we forward project that classes of about 130 to 135 would start rolling in over the next 1 and 2 and 3 years, what's that do for your math there?
Certainly the way the building is set and the way the program is set up, we could utilize it. It would be, I think, different than what Scott was saying. We could utilize spaces right there and go to like a 6-teacher model and have enough space in each one of the hallway areas.
So would you need to, you know, because like right now, I'm looking at it, it's at like 120 to 103, you know, so would you, again, be kind of projecting that as the 130 start rolling in
So,
year over year, you'd have to
right now,
add to, at
if
each
you look
grade
at-
level, one at a time?
It's 116 kids on average, so that puts them at the 23.3.
Yeah.
So 126 kids, that's 10 more, that would get this to 24. And then 25 more would be like 141. So though you're gonna get to like 24 to 25 kids per classroom with those 130 student classes rolling in, is the way I'm interpreting the way this is analyzed.
Yeah, and what I was looking for was that threshold of when we would need to go from 5 teachers to 6. Is that And I just get the feel it's around 130, 135, just based on what you were saying, but I wasn't, that's why I wanted to ask it back, I guess.
Well, first of all, I think the threshold would be, when we hit over 140 students, we're going to have to start
You have
thinking
to
of
do
different
something.
ways
Yeah.
of doing business. You have to remember, though, with the middle school model, it's not as easy, I wish it was, but it's not as easy just
Yeah.
adding a teacher,
Yeah, no.
because we have the specialists.
Yep.
And it can, well, what happens, I haven't figured out a way not to do it this way. Maybe there is a way, but I haven't discovered it yet. You really have to blow up the model as those kids, their students more correctly, come into the school. And then when you reach that capacity as they go through, that first class goes through and finishes grade 8, you should have the capacity to go back to the middle school model. But I think it's going to have to be fragmented for a while. I can't think of another way to do it in a cost-efficient manner.
And that's why I was just using the number, because like I said, right now, we can see 130, 135 easily rolling through over the next couple of years, grade at a time, bumping them up from the 120s, 100s that you are now. With that coming, if that fulfills itself as destiny here, does that going to need a change in our model, or is it if we bump to 140, which that wouldn't, it's not likely that we're going to get a big increase in our, fifth grade enrollment next year, is there?
Well, part of the challenge, Darrell, is if you just add one more classroom at grade 6, for example, we would have to hire differently. We'd
Yeah.
have to hire people with
I'm just saying,
special areas.
Just-
and-
I'm just
let
saying,
that
at
go for a minute.
at
Think
grade
about it.
6,
Right.
135 kids are into the classroom. Can you accommodate that, or do you have to start changing your model at that point?
Well, I think we can accommodate that.
27.
At
Uh,
140 kids divide, with the current model, it's 28 kids in a class.
I feel like, I see where you're going. I feel like 135, 130 to 135 is okay. 140, you're starting to push it. We survived it, that ninth grade class, where it was 140 when they got to kindergarten. It was a little bit less than that when they finally made it to the middle school. And we kind of just hung in there because it was an aberration, and we didn't feel like we needed to blow up the model or add capacity.
I guess this is going to go into the later discussion,
Yeah.
because we're not talking a 1-year bubble. I think we're talking maybe a 6 or
Correct.
7-year bubble.
Correct. Right,
As we
it's
build
right.
out as a town.
How long do you want to, how long do you want to bite the bullet? 1 year is one thing, 2 years is something, 5 years is a whole nother thing, and 10 years is like, wait a minute, we're not biting the bullet anymore, we're swallowing it.
Right.
So,
And that's why I just kind of wanted to get the feel is as 130 rolls in, it sounds like it's comfortable. 135 is getting tight,
Push it next.
140, we start getting really uncomfortable.
Exactly.
I just want to kind of
Yep.
know those.
yeah, I think that's a good way to think about
And
it.
I will add, though, in the current model, because of the way students are scheduled for their languages, all of the classes aren't divided equally. Like, so in 8th grade, for example, we have classes with 19 students in them and classes with 26 students in them to accommodate their language choices, because those teachers rotate for all 3 grades. So, while a classroom with 28 kids in it is getting a little tight, it still is doable in all of our classrooms, and that's currently exists right now.
Do our 6th and 7th grade classrooms still operate on the homeroom model where the same group of students is moving throughout the day with the exception of the language?
No, we start with a flex block model in the morning now, and everyone has a flex block, so all the language teachers, everybody has a flex block. So those are smaller groups in flex block for the first half hour, and then they go into their first academic or unified arts class at 7:50.
But is each student are all the students around me, if I'm a student in my first period, are all the students around me then going to be the same students around me at the end of the day?
No.
Because I remember we did that a number of years ago, but I think we transitioned out of that.
When we introduced the new approach to language
Language, we come to that.
offering, the model changed.
I think that was only 6th grade that did that, and then when we did the new language model for 6th grade, that's when that one broke up. 7th and 8th grade,
Has always
because
been.
they always had multiple languages, it was a more traditional high school type of, where you're with some kids all day. And
So 6th grade is like that now?
Yeah.
6th grade is more like the high school model currently?
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to get
Well,
into...
with
I'm
the
sorry.
exception of we have grade 6 teams, grade 7 teams.
Right,
grade
no,
8
right, but it's, they're not, like Alex's question, they're not the same. When I remember 6th grade, you had one class, you moved teachers.
No.
Now, I don't want to get in spend too much time here talking about like a hypothetical situation, but when you say blow it up, that model, do you mean then it would be more like the elementary school model?
No, you'd have a
Back then,
teacher that would be teaching multiple grades.
Right.
That's the
Oh, so you
difference.
just have some.
Instead of having all
Okay.
sixth
Similar to a
graders,
high
you would have
school.
sixth graders
So
and
you'd still,
seventh.
the model
and
from the
eighth.
student's perspective would still be the same. It would be
Teaching
how you
model would
enter.
be
The
different.
teaching model's
Right,
different.
teaching model would be.
And you lose that team
Right,
concept
right,
to a
right.
degree. It doesn't necessarily have to be abandoned,
No.
but it
It
would
just becomes
definitely
more
have to be
complicated.
modified,
Right.
correct.
And the support system, I think, because the kids are in middle school, that is like a key growth area. I think we value the team model in part because it
sure.
allows the teachers to say, hey, have you seen so-and-so? Were they
Right.
acting up in your class? They're acting up in my class too.
Right.
There would be, in my opinion, a point in time after the wave went through where we could reestablish that model because we'd have the staff and it was
Right.
reconfigured. But that would take a few years, probably 4 years.
I just want to reiterate that Daryl made the point that it might happen, it won't happen now. The question will be,
This is more longer-term things here.
Yeah,
that we're
exactly.
talking
So,
about.
the people that are listening, because it has engendered some significant debate from the community when we have, not that we've ever actively contemplated it, but when the rumor that we were contemplating it was out there, it engendered quite a bit of response. And if we were going to contemplate making a change like that, we would make sure the community was well involved. It's not imminent at all. So people just should be sure that the current model is right where it needs to be.
I want people, to understand, we're trying to get ahead of this instead
Correct.
of being surprised and then
Right,
having to do a
right.
change.
That's the other thing.
emergency
Right.
change
You would
in
hope
our-
that
in our-
if we were going to make a
plan.
change, it would be with at least a year's notice, and hopefully even more than that. Or even if we never made a change, what might be worthwhile is to understand how we would probably go about it. So, just put the contingency plan in place so that we understand the staff, the community, everybody understands what it would entail. And also from a budget perspective and a planning perspective also.
And we may have to hire differently as
Yeah.
time goes on too, to prepare for that.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
All right, great, thank you.
We should have had this as a joint meeting with the planning board.
Well, no, I mean.
Well, I have
Instead
something
of
to say
time,
about
right,
that.
but, yeah.
But I think as we were talking in our previous years, is getting a roll on strategic issues.
Correct.
And this is one of them, is it takes several years of planning to get to this
Exactly.
here
Yeah.
versus just reacting to everything.
Correct. I'm going to have more to say about that in a few minutes.
I'll pick up where Darryl left off right there. I think it's really down the road for us at the high school. You can see just in terms of the enrollment at each class level. We'll be steady. We have, I think next year, this current June, we expect about 122 graduates and then 125 or so students projected to come in the following September into the 9th grade. So that level should be steady for a little bit. There is that big class in the 5th grade right now that we're looking at, and I think that's still on our mind. But there are other factors that we need to be aware of. The stats are there for you, they've been there for your review with our pupil-teacher ratio. Some areas that stand out for us just in terms of just general themes or areas for the committee to look for in the future would be and Alex was speaking to this earlier, any projected enrollment growth or unanticipated enrollment growth due to the new subdivisions in town, move-ins. We had a student move in today from Maine. His father was a graduate of Wilton High School in the 90s, and he's returned to town. So that type of stuff just happens ordinarily in a high school, but that happened today, so we're likely to be up a student. And then there's the staffing and programmatic changes that might be a little bit more of an issue at the high school, particularly in light of the areas where we want to change as we're more forward-looking, as we want to, especially in light of the movie that we saw, the screening of the film, Most Likely to Succeed. How might we change our program of studies in the near future to meet the needs of kids and prepare them for career, college, and citizenship? We're looking at all that. So there's the staffing and programmatic changes that might affect our pupil-teacher ratio and our hiring. There's also, I think, because we have a 4-year requirement for English and math, we'll have to look at additional teaching sections. So this is not just an issue around, it's the school capacity or the classroom capacity is really also related to our hiring or our staffing and how we share staff or how staff share spaces. So I do anticipate requesting from the superintendent and the school committee at some point in the near future additional sections for math, specifically for programmatic changes, but also we're getting near our contractual pupil-teacher ratio. We're right there underneath it right now, and with careful scheduling, we've been able to manage class sizes, but our overall pupil-teacher ratio is contractually mandated and mandates an additional hire at some point. So I just wanted to advise the committee that the superintendent's well aware of that. We talked about it, but that's something that's on our minds. But when you bring in an additional staff member, then that means that it has an impact on space and shared space. We also have a desire among lots of people in the community, from students, parents, and staff, for elective offerings. We're a small high school still, relatively, hovering anywhere between 467 and 470, depending on the day sometimes. And then there's also the issue of school choice for the committee to consider. In the current senior class, we have probably 13 to 14 students who are school choice students exiting. That's a revenue issue that the superintendent, the business manager, and I will be talking, about, as well as with the committee, how many school choice slots we open up. But we bring in more students to replace them, then there's also that shared space thing. That would be just a sort of that's something we need to consider, because I have to look at the current 8th grade class too and determine how many are school choice too, because that could offset that number, of students exiting too. So I just wanted to bring up those issues related to staffing that impact school capacity. The instructional spaces were detailed for you, with 23 spaces roughly upstairs and 11 downstairs. I did make a couple additional notes upon examining this, and it was nice to have a couple extra days to think about it, since we had postponed the meeting. And I just wanted to bring some highlights to the committee's attention. I already mentioned the fact that increased enrollment staffing will lead to more shared spaces and traveling teachers. The teachers are well aware of that. They're accustomed to having their own rooms. It's been nice for sort of community building within the school, or the history of the school. We do have a limited number of open instructional spaces per mod and period with our current configuration of assigned directed studies and classes. So if new courses are added due to increased enrollment or programmatic changes, we'll need to reassign some teacher classrooms and directed studies. So that will have an impact definitely on the feeling in the building and just how teachers spend their time during the day. Some recent changes for the committee to be aware of are that the special education area we have a new classroom there that's displaced the rather large faculty room we had. It's been, with the faculty, you may recall where it was. It was there for years since it was built. It's now a large special education area that was required for us to expand our programming there. We also have a close partnership with Case Collaborative, but that's also entailed some impact on the building, where we've just, a few years back, we added a Case classroom, but we moved the graphic arts and photography classroom upstairs to where we had a Mac lab. And so that's now a full-fledged classroom of graphic arts and photography classes. The tech office has been added to the high school. An ELL office has moved around several times within the building. The robotics program, which we're very proud of and excited about, we think poses also a nice opportunity for us to expand shop and hands-on learning opportunities in the future programmatically during the day. Robotics primarily happens after school, but that's displaced the maintenance office, and that's a district impact, because Bill Maher is out of the high school. The other issue for the committee to be aware of is it's also impacted storage at the high school. And that's something that Steve and I wrestle with Bill Maher frequently, also with Mike Deneau, who's our theater manager. We're constantly trying to find spots to put stuff. I think that's probably a common trend at all the schools. But the storage issue is an issue I wanted to bring to your attention. It's not necessarily classroom space, but it has a huge impact on our daily experience. I think the music program could, they'll talk about that and with some of the things they use for some of their performances that need to be stored downstairs, have to be hauled up every time they do a fine production like they did the other night. The Kiva, which is renovated and we're very excited about, it's a wonderful space. And the seminar room off the library, where the school committee meetings used to be, are currently used as classrooms during the day. And that was not the case when the school committee meetings were out of there. So were hosted there. So that's something we need to think about, that, they're not available for general use like they used to be. So in sum, really, we have needs, and one of the needs that we would identify for you tonight would be inadequate storage for science, music, and theater arts. A math teacher who travels 4 to 5 times per day to different rooms. We'd prefer to minimize his movement, but we understand the situation. He's very good about managing it. But we'd like to also expand his role as a computer science teacher, and if we do that, programmatically, we need to have him maybe more situated in a space. And the other thing on the horizon for the future is to look for the chemistry program. We have one chemistry lab that's really adequately outfitted for chemistry labs with 6 sections of chemistry. So ideally, we would have 2 full-fledged chemistry labs in different spaces. That could be a modification to a classroom but it would cost, and we'd need to prepare for that. Especially with increased enrollment, we might have increased sections of chemistry. It's pretty much a staple course now at the high school for the majority of our sophomores. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. So I wanted to give you a full picture of some of the things that are going on, the things we're talking about, because I know that's getting back to you, because a lot of our faculty live in town, and they're very vocal about feeling crammed at times. So you may have heard from them already. So I wanted to address their concerns adequately tonight on their behalf and on behalf of the whole school. Happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
Go ahead.
Please, after you.
All right. Again, it'll be the same type of question as the other one. Looking at your current
Yep.
configuration, you're comfortable maybe with the addition of the math teacher at the 120-ish per grade level type of thing there, which looks like it will probably cover
Yeah,
us for
steady.
2 or 3 years.
Yes, yeah.
And then once we start hitting 130s,
Yeah.
which is 3 years out.
Class sizes become a factor, just
becomes a
hiring
very-
staff.
much more significant
Yep.
issue at the high school then.
Yep.
That's,
Yeah, and also to provide adequate number of sections for that to meet the graduation requirements of English and English. That's on the horizon for us. And so I'm going to try to figure out a way. We'll be okay right now, based on the exiting students and the incoming. But for the following year. But in the future, we'll have to prepare for that. That we're providing adequate teaching sections with the appropriate class size to meet the graduation requirements.
right, that's what I mean, when the classes of, the 130
Yes.
size classes start hitting the high school, I
Exactly.
think is when it starts becoming a real issue if you
Yeah.
hear what you're.
Yeah, the class, yeah.
Okay,
Space.
thank you.
Alex?
So what I'm hearing is that the current layout of the high school is using all of our rooms very effectively. I mean, the Kiva, the seminar room, those were used to occasionally be used by a class, but not every day, all the time.
Kiva? The Kiva is used all day.
The Kiva has been for a while.
It's 5 classes now there.
Yeah, that's a change, and I think it's important because I know there are some older folks in town who haven't seen the new building, so the new high school still. Who say, oh, it's massive, and they got tons of space in there, and don't they have like a ton of extra space? And we don't, and I think you're using it really effectively, and so I wanted to give you a tip of the hat for that. I also wanted to note that although if we were to have more students coming in over the next couple of years and we did need to add additional staff, we still have options. They come with costs, like the case classrooms, again, affects our billing.
Right, that's something that's on our mind.
And the case classrooms, I think we've also seen with the Best Buddies program, we have a lot of integration, which I know I think is fantastic. And I think as a district has brought a lot of goods to the district to connect our general ed LPS students
Right.
with some
But you know where they
specialties.
moved into a classroom where you spent a lot of time as a student.
I know that. I'm glad they're using it. And that's another,
Yeah.
the configuration of the high school changes so often
Yeah.
to meet those needs. But we could, if we needed to, move some of the office spaces used by case. It would cost us, but we're not bursting at the seams, we don't imminently need to build anything. And so when we're talking about being proactive, I wanted to point that out too, because I think it's important to recognize that we are not by any means, I think we're looking right now at sort of like our worst case scenario, what happens if. And I want to make sure that for folks who are listening tonight, that we're that's just a planning exercise, and that we are not, the sky is not falling, the roof is not caving
No.
in.
Well.
And then the other.
Roof is leaking.
You had to
It
bring that up
almost
tonight?
did a few years ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's leaking, it's not falling.
Literally or figuratively?
And hopefully a trickle will not become a stream. And then the other question I had, and I don't know enough about this topic, but as education changes, co-teaching has been catching on a little bit more in some districts. I know this is one of those issues where we might not always want to be on the front of this because we don't know how best it works, or staff might not have as much experience with it. And I personally don't know if that would alleviate class sizes or not. Maybe you still need, even if you brought in an extra staff person, you would still only want
Yeah, you're still
20
limited by the
kids.
number of kids you put in the room, so just.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So
certain rooms.
I wanted to throw that out there as maybe something to think about.
Teachers will share a lot, we have teachers who have shared classroom spaces with 2 teacher desks and a space to work out of, and that happens now. So, and co-teaching is alive and well at the high school, as well as I believe at the middle school, they do a lot, so.
Well, thank you.
Okay.
Just a little bit more information. Case is in the process of leasing space for a new high school, for a high school that has to relocate. And within that building, there will most likely be room to, if necessary, relocate some of those specialists that are occupying space in their schools. It will create some inefficiencies for them in terms of travel time, et cetera, but definitely they would have a new home if the space goes through, so.
So are they looking to move out of some of our spaces anyway?
No, this is a high school that exists in one of our other communities, and they're reclaiming the space. I think they're going to tear down the building and rebuild. So we needed to find a new location for the high school.
Thank you. Just want to preface some remarks I have, and then talk about where we think we want to go with this. I appreciate the effort you guys put forward in getting us this information. I think it's a good first pass. I think it helps us start to frame the discussion. A couple of things that I take away is it's a kind of a two-pronged thing that we have to think about. One is just staffing. How many students are we comfortable with in each building? And the thing to keep in mind is that the primary elementary classroom model is much different than the subject-based models of the middle school and the high school. So it's really, that's two prongs in and of itself. Thinking about how we staff the younger grades and how we staff the older grades. And I think that we should do, a good analysis based on the information we've got and kind of pull it all together and think about, what our strategies are. Because as we've heard, it's not simply a matter of adding staff, especially at the middle school and the high school. And when we think about the other programs we have, because one thing we haven't talked about in more detail in terms of staffing or even space-wise is, yeah, you're going to need more regular ed teachers, but by definition, you'll need more special ed teachers too, because you'll have more special ed kids, because you have more kids, and we have to think about that and where we would house them. I think that one thing we should think about is and again, because this is a planning exercise, as Alex said, I think that we should throw all the constraints off and just think about there are different ways to do it, and we shouldn't give up on any of them out of the gate. We should be willing to consider anything. The idea that a teacher has a classroom at the high school might be something that we say, well, in one model you wouldn't. You simply wouldn't. You would just have you would go to these classrooms, and at this time of the day you're there, and at the other times of the day somebody else is there, things like that. At the middle school, it may very well mean that we have to, modify the team model for a while, and how will we best do that, but still retain the benefits, the clear benefits that the community's experienced by virtue of having that in place for so long. But we should be willing to at least consider it as a planning exercise, because I think if we do, we might see some opportunities that'll work. And that's in terms of the staffing. In terms of the building space, I appreciate the idea that we could repurpose some of the space that we currently use for different reasons. And I also think that it would be good to, again, throw off some constraints, is think about if we did have to add physical space, how would we do it? I don't think that adding a new building is really going to solve any problems, and I don't think it's anything anybody here would contemplate, but it might very well require adding a wing to a particular building. And there are, I think the high school is specifically designed for that, capacity. The other buildings weren't, but we may be able to figure something out akin to what we would do at the high school, adding a wing. That's the kind of thing where we would definitely want to get on board with the planning board, finance committee, board of selectmen, to think about, what would that require in terms of capital planning, land acquisition, repurposing of land, fields that we already have could be part of the discussion. So what I would like to suggest is that, take this as a first pass, and then I think as a committee, some of us should volunteer to take it and start to put a report together with the audience being those other boards in the community at large, to say, this is the planning exercise, this is the information we have, we want to use this as an opportunity, as a community, to go through a planning exercise, to think about what do we think is the best way to handle these challenges if they come our way. And it could be a scaled thing. At this much growth, we scale it to this level. At this much growth, we would have to make this jump and, go from there. So that's kind of the way I've listened to this, and as I listened to it, I thought about what do we do next? And I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say.
Well, I guess I guess I like what you outlined there, and I kind of like the idea also kind of pushing it back to the administration to think about it. I think through this discussion here, we've got a good feel of, what the current usage and plan is there. I think the administration has a keen aspect of how funding might or might not be available for outrageous changes in the thing here. So I think it could be a balanced proposal of, it may not necessarily always have to be just incremental. There might be opportunities to rethink of what we're doing there, and not try to invent it sort of on the fly, from here, but, it's an opportunity to put some thought into it of how we might restructure, knowing that we're gonna have, 130 size classes coming through for the next several years, kind of thing there.
The special ed classrooms at Shaker Lane, are any of those case, or are those all in district special ed?
They were all
Early
in district.
All in district? Okay.
We had to reclaim those. We had a couple of case classes there up to about 5 years ago. We had to reclaim those rooms.
Okay, that's good to know. In all of our other buildings, I think the case classrooms tend to provide us with some flexibility in terms of the building, literally in terms of the building structure, the structure with a capital S. And I think that helps us when we do have this conversation, that to emphasize that we are not by any means in any sort of panic mode or anything like that. We're just having the talk. And at Shaker Lane too, I mean, we have options. We don't love any of them. None of them are things we necessarily want to do. But we're not, we're not going to have a line out the door. So I wanted to point that out.
Do I have to jump back in? I just want to state, several times we've talked about, whether we can have the case or not. I want to make sure there's no indication that we're moving away from an inclusion model of our special ed students here, and we're not making a trade-off that we're going to outplace simply to recover space.
Correct.
I just want to, we've said it a couple of times, and I just don't want the wrong impression to come across.
I think, right, the assumption is that by being a member of the CASE Collaborative, we have the opportunity to give space to the collaborative, and that cuts it. There's two benefits. One is that the kids that are our kids don't have to travel, and if that particular service or classroom is in a different building, in a different district, they would have to take a little ride to get there. And the second is that we do get a benefit, a reduction in the cost of our participation in CASE by virtue of having them there. So we wouldn't abandon that,
No,
we have a requirement.
Yeah, no, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
Just
We have
because
to offer
we've
some
identified
space,
that a
right?
couple of times.
Well,
and I just-
it's really the philosophical underpinning of the CASE program is to have classrooms within the
Right.
districts that belong to CASE. And it provides education in the least restrictive environment. So if our students, some of our students have to go to another community to receive an educational program, they're in a school rather than isolated in a building all by themselves. So it's a great program, and it's been very beneficial to the community of Littleton and all, I think, other 13 other communities
I
that belong
mean,
to
to
it.
the point too, like, let's say for the sake of argument that we had to come up with a temporary solution, while we figured out. I'd be the last person to say, well, just throw all the CASE classrooms in the temporary.
Yeah, that's what I mean, I just don't want
Yeah,
people to
we
come
wouldn't
away
do
with the
that,
wrong, the wrong
there's
impression of the
Sure,
discussion.
sure.
Big
Here, we're
reasons why you
committed
don't
to-
do that,
Right.
and we would never
Right.
think to do that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we're not backing off our commitment to inclusion and other pieces there, so.
I appreciate you saying that. It's important.
And when CASE determines, when we go to CASE and say, yes, we have a classroom, or you've been using this classroom, we want to continue to let you use this classroom for your programs, they presumably specify the programs that they want to run there. Do they factor in the programs that our students tend to use most? So if we have a higher demand for autism in the district, or maybe a smaller demand for autism in the district, will that change whether or not we have an autism classroom?
Well, they try to design programs in communities that have the largest critical mass, which makes sense in terms of a business model. CASE, like every other SPED collaborative, is retooling as more districts, including our district, have the critical mass of students to offer our own programs. And we've done that in the last 3 years. And when we do that, that takes away from what CASE is offering, and they have to, for lack of a better phrase, reinvent themselves and offer other programs for students that the member districts don't have the capacity to offer. So that's really how CASE works. And so they evolve throughout time.
They're sort of specializing right now.
Exactly.
So, I mean, at this point, what I would like to do is maybe sit down with the superintendent and kind of go through an exercise to bring these 4 separate reports together, standardize them, maybe incorporate some of the things that we've talked about, the last 2 times that we've had it, and review it again as a committee with the ultimate goal of coming up with a document that we can present to the community to say, this is where we are, this is where we think we're going to be in the near term, this is where we think we might be in the longer term. These are our contingencies, these are our assumptions, these are the opportunities, the challenges, et cetera. Sound all right?
Yep.
And I think this is a fairly, we're not going to do this in a couple of weeks. I think this is going to take a while. It's going to be an iterative process before we're comfortable feeling like we've got something that we want to present as a, sort of a finished document. But I think we should stay with it and allocate the time and the effort to make it happen. I think it's important for us. We've said we were going to do it. I think we're off to a good start. We just got to keep pushing and follow through all the way.
The other thing to keep in mind with this is this is another example of our school district, the administration, doing the most they could possibly do with the resources that are available. I know we talk about it a lot. Kelly, you often come to us and talk about how you save $70,000 by doing one thing or another. And with the space, it's no different. I mean, we're sort of fitting round holes in the square pegs in round holes. But when we go through this whole process, something to keep in mind is, I sound ridiculous saying this because obviously you are all considering the principals, but keeping in mind as this planning process is going forward, the opportunities that are missed by the reorganization of these schools. All of these school buildings were designed for a purpose. The high school was designed with a seminar room for the purpose of having a seminar room, and the Kiva and the mobile arts carts for Shaker Lane and Russell Street, that may work, but there's always a cost associated with that. So we shouldn't see these things as free spaces which, just miraculously showed up, right? They were all designed there for a purpose, and now they're being reappropriated for something else. So as the space, as the space conversation goes forward, it's important that we remember that there's always a balance, class size. There's a million things that you're balancing on these scales, but one of them are these intended purposes that you're no longer.
Well, that's why I think, to Daryl's point, I think that we need to go through the planning exercise, because otherwise we're going to be strictly in a reactive mode, and that's when you're going to pull the art classroom offline
Exactly.
and go to the mobile one. If we go through the planning exercise, we may say, at this point, we want to tip, because it's the right thing to do. While it will be costly and it will have an impact in the short term in terms of, you gotta build it, you gotta do this, whatever it is, you wanna do it because, otherwise you're gonna die the death of 1,000 cuts.
Exactly, and the reminder is just to look a little bit retroactively already.
And you're gonna ask yourself, how did we get here? And you're gonna say, it was 100 small decisions.
Right.
That's why we
And
ended
those
up here.
decisions, I guess my point is that those decisions have already started, right?
Right.
So they're very nobody watching should think that the loss of the seminar room is gonna affect, their students' future, but it's important to remember that these things have already started, and reclaiming some of these spaces, whether it's an option or not, is worth it.
But at the same time, it also gives an opportunity to revisit, is the seminar room, while it was designed 17 years ago, is that really what the need is?
Absolutely.
I think it's fair to put all of those on the table for, determining what the appropriate recommendations are on it.
Again, there may be opportunity. There may be opportunity to reshape how we go about doing our business and that we wouldn't necessarily otherwise consider. But by virtue, if we're gonna make some, if we have to do this anyway, let's think about the best way to do it and position ourselves so that we don't have to go through this exercise again for a while. That would be the ultimate goal, is to minimize the impact and shorten the timeframe in which we're dealing with it, so that then we can then start to just go back to our daily business and go that way for, years at a time, generations of students at a time again.
Good point.
All right.
So the only one piece I wanted to add, is as I look at some of the demographic reports and studies that are coming out, there is the long-term Massachusetts projection that, school-age children are going to decrease over time, and I think probably at the macro level, those are all the right things there. As I look more microscopically here, mature communities are clearly seeing that. Growing communities are still seeing a growth. They'll see it for a few more years until they either build out or stabilize at those macro projections there. So that's why I think we're going to see, because we still have growth space in town, that we're going to probably still see that continuing increase, even though other communities, even next door, are probably already seeing decreases in student population. Kind of thing there. That's why trying to get a handle on, is our future 130, 140 for 10 years, then we're going to start seeing, Littleton turning into a mature community, and then those longer term stable, then potentially decreases there. So those are very difficult to get true projections on, but I mean, the gut feel says that that's the trend we're going to see on it.
I agree with you. I also think to keep in mind is that our community, based on our zoning and our land mass and things like that, I think we can do a pretty good job of modeling and figuring out what's going to happen. If we were a bigger town with more land and/or different zoning, cluster zoning type of aspects, the way in Acton or Westford are, with many more apartment complexes and things like that, then I would say that it's a much more difficult thing to model.
I mainly put that out there because, there is a lot of talk that, over time, Massachusetts and all of New England is going to see decreases in school-age children. I just looking at it at a micro level, I don't think we're going to be there for longer than the rest of the other parts of the state or the area here. On it. Just to counter the, those statements that are out there about the overall population projections.
Okay. All right, we good on that one? All right, thank you, everybody. All right, next item under old business is the FY18 budget discussion. And most of us were at the joint meeting that we had with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen back on 2 Tuesdays ago on February 7th, but I just wanted to go over what happened in that meeting and just think about where we're at. That joint meeting was an opportunity for the Finance Committee to look at the whole budget picture for the town. All the other departments have put their budgets in place, and the town administration went through with their projections on revenue and things like that. Prior to having the meeting, they put out some documentation, and the way they frame it is, and we've talked about this before, level services and mission budget, where level services is what it would cost for each department to continue to offer the same staffing levels and service levels from the previous fiscal year to the next fiscal year. mission budget is, what would you like to add in terms of, staffing and/or servicing. When that initially came out, they had in the school department the level services budget increase of $586,000. But what I pointed out to them prior to having the meeting was that that's only for our salary level increase. It's not for our level service increase. For level services, we had to add back in, let's see what I got here. We have increases in SPED and CASE out of district tuition. We have some increases in some of our other expenses like water and, real quick, sorry. These are all things that we had presented to them at the budget summit and went over with them again. But anyway, ultimately what it came down to was when you add all those things in, it was our level service, the number that we would definitely feel comfortable representing as level service was $807,000. Even that didn't include, we're projecting that we need an additional teacher, Russell Street classroom teacher. I have it, I just got to dig it out. We think that we need, because of our growing class sizes at Shaker Lane and Russell Street, we want to add a special gym/art/music teacher. We also want, a Title I math teacher. And we need the ELL teacher, which is actually included in the $800,000 number that we put forth. Really, when you add those in there, we're at more like 1.1 million. And then the last thing that we maybe would consider mission budget is, going to tuition-free full-day kindergarten. After talking to them and sending kind of a memo via email, they agreed to put the $807,000 number into their model. What that then showed was that with that increase and all the other increases from the other town departments, along with the assumptions that are being made about funding, there's a projected deficit of about $426,000 for the town to achieve that level service budget for FY18. However, at the meeting, the assistant town administrator indicated that one of the assumptions that's in the model is a 12% increase in health insurance premiums for the town. She thinks that they're going to be able to negotiate that, and it could conceivably be only 60%, which would decrease that deficit by about $250,000 and only make it $176,000. So we need to get more information on that, because that's obviously a pretty big delta. The other thing that they wanted from us that I want to talk about tonight is the status of our revolving funds. Because one thing that we haven't done yet, even at a budget subcommittee level, was because we're waiting for information from them about what they think they can support, is what we think our reliance on our revolving funds should be. So what I'd like to do tonight is just talk about...
So, Mike?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going through the thing there. So the 807, which is what they put in the current required services budget,
Yep.
Includes the SPED custodial increases.
Yeah, that was the other big one,
Right.
custodial increase.
And the ELL teacher. It does not include the Russell Street teacher, the Title I math instructor, or the assistant principal.
Correct.
So-
Or the specials.
Or the specials, yeah. Or the
It does
specials.
include the ELL teacher.
Yes, it included the ELL teacher
Correct.
there. So I just not sure where it places us relative to the discussion we just heard tonight about the need for the Russell Street classroom teacher at grade 4.
Well, without the addition of a teacher, we'd be looking at, a grade 4 teacher, we'd be looking at class sizes of 26 and 27 for grade 4.
In the memo that I sent, the position that I put forth for the school committee as your chair was that we consider that level service. We really do consider that, to have class sizes grow beyond what we think is an appropriate number, by definition, we're no longer level serviced.
Yeah.
Whether or not you can do it, it's the same thing. It's if the state mandated that the police department do immigration inspections at all the businesses, and they try to do that with their current staff. They're not level serviced. They're not providing the same level of service and all the other aspects of, what they do for the town. And it's the same thing for our teachers. We ask them to teach that many more kids in a classroom, and the kids that would otherwise be in there with the fewer kids are no longer level serviced.
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with your argument there, but the 807 doesn't include that.
Correct, the 807 doesn't.
That's what I
mean,
wanted to make sure
again,
people understood right now.
It's an effort to work cooperatively with the other boards and to conform with the modeling that they're using, albeit with caveats. And really, the thing that I wanted to take away from that was the initial number for them was a level staffing budget. And we've had this discussion at length in previous years.
Right.
The level staffing model may correspond quite decently with other town departments as to level service. There's just a correlation between staffing and service. They don't have quite the expense levels or the percentage of their budget driven by what I would consider non-staffing expenses that we do, primarily special education.
Yeah, I don't mean to keep driving on this, but, if we consider the list here, Russell Street Classroom, the specials, Title I, assistant principal, and then full-day kindergarten, the 120, we're at the 807, those are not in that list. So
Correct.
those are all adds that we'd have to work through the budget process to get agreement from the Finance Committee and Selectmen to add that money in at this point.
Or, as we've gone through the budgeting exercises over the last several years, or it's a question of the appropriation can absorb the 800,000, and, maybe we need to absorb some other spending through our revolving funds.
Yeah.
And, that part of the debate hasn't happened yet.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure people are clear in terms of what's sort of included by that 807
Correct.
number that's in the various Selectmen notes at this point and our discussion here.
And we had a very frank discussion with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen. All those points were made and understood. Having said that, they're basically looking at a deficit situation based on the current modeling. So I think we all need to be cognizant of that.
Yeah.
But they are aware that the $800,000 number is not really what we would consider our total required spending. It's a number that we think meets their modeling methodology, and then the rest of it we can certainly have discussions about.
Yeah.
I mean, as it is, we're not the only department asking to add staffing. The fire department is looking to add staffing, the police department is looking to add staffing. The town offices did add staffing outside the traditional budget cycle, that now has to be, the spending for that has to be incorporated into the budget. So, there's a long way to go before we, as a town, we make a determination about what we think we can sustain or how best to sustain it. And that's part of what we want to talk about tonight. So.
One other thing that is probably going to be a large discussion and a bit of a debate around the leadership table. When we look at our specials K to 5, we've really become victim, for lack of a better word, to focusing on ELA and math as a result of the accountability era. And as a result of this, our students are getting one special a week. So they get one art class a week, one phys ed class a week. And you have to ask yourself, what do we set as a priority in terms of development of the whole child? And my philosophies may closely align with my leadership team. They may not be identically aligned. I always believe and have had a successful track record of educating the whole child and not overemphasizing one or two subject areas. They're important, but so are those other skills. We talk about social and emotional learning. And when I really look at our configuration of our K-5, and I haven't even talked to my leadership team about this yet, but it is very heavily structured according to the accountability expectations set by the state and the federal government. And I'm not saying that we need a massive change, but I think that needs to be part of our conversation as we move forward. Is one phys ed class a week enough for students when we look at our nation as a whole and take a look at health issues in our youth, for example, because of lack of physical activity? Well, these are all parts of our discussion that we need to have as we move forward in vision.
I appreciate that, and I think everybody here is supportive of that idea. The other thing that I would like to point out, though, is that we've already had discussion on those classes relative to those buildings where, because of the way the scheduling has to happen, we're adding regular ed classrooms and trying to fit the kids into that one time a week model with the current staffing we have for the specials. Now you're getting into, we talk about 26, 27 kids in a classroom, but you've got 30, 35 kids in an art class or music class or a gym class with one teacher. That's, regardless of the fact that one's probably not enough or ideal, the fact is the one they're getting is not ideal either, because it's oversubscribed. And then really, it's putting pressure on those teachers, unfair pressure, but it's also, making it harder to do the scheduling across the building. So it's beyond just having them in gym class. It's, there's a cascading effect that we need to address.
Right. I think the other thing that I think we should keep in mind when we're having this conversation is that we are still in many ways still in a restorative budget. So the classroom teacher at Russell Street that we're hoping to restore this year, that I think everyone at this table would recognize is would under normal circumstances be a level service request. We didn't present it that way as a show of good faith, but we also stated that it would not be the same level of service provided if we do not add that professional. And that, of course, affects the specials. Each one of these items, I think, we all believe is important for us to move forward as a district. And so as we have the conversation and as we begin to delve into how much are we willing to take out of the revolving fund, which increases our risk as a district, which 5-6 years ago the town wanted us not to do. Now they're wanting us to do that more. As we keep that in mind, I want to ask the question, and not necessarily to you all, but to the public and hopefully to the Board of Selectmen, I think, when we meet with them again. If not now, when are we going to, in what economic environment are we going to be able to grow as a district? Or are we always going to be fighting for level service? And that's a conversation that I think we need to have as a town, not just around this table, but if folks are okay as a town staying level service and just moving along and doing our best, and we're still improving as a district, but we certainly are missing opportunities by not expanding more, by not meeting our mission budget or catching up with communities who are on full-day kindergarten or adding some of the supports that we need in the classroom. If we're not doing that now, when are we expecting that to happen? I'm looking at you, not because I expect you to have the answer, but.
Why not?
I don't have the answer, I have an answer that I put out there before. The problem is that in the biggest, it wasn't talked about all that explicitly last Tuesday, but the state aid is flat.
It's a little bit down.
Yeah,
for us.
it's right. It's effectively down like $12,000, As a town, and every community in the Commonwealth is facing this problem, until local aid starts to grow, there is no way we're going to be able to keep pace with the rise in expenses, whether or not we're growing as a district or not. But we are not going to be able to keep pace with, just raising our property taxes every year. I mean, there is some new growth, that's great, but, we can develop our commercial base more, but those are all finite compared to local aid. When we were able to add staff and grow the district was prior to the recession, when Chapter 70 got fixed and there were more local aid dollars flowing into the town every year, tens of thousands of dollars that were available for.
Chapter 70 partially corrected.
Made less onerous to Littleton. That's when we were in a growth mode. When the state was increasing their contribution to our budget, we could grow. Really, what I'm more concerned about is that we are going to grow as a town and a district, and trying to stay level staffed simply isn't going to be enough. And as a town, we're going to probably have to make some difficult decisions about what are we willing to live without. It may be that as a town, the answer is, well, 22 is not going to work for you guys anymore. It's going to have to be 27. And we're not going to be able to have that many patrolmen, and we're not going to be able to do this or that or the other thing, or we're going to have to increase the tax base, beyond what we typically do year by year. Those are the kinds of decisions and debates that we're going to have short of local aid, growing. If local aid starts to increase, I think we can all breathe a little easier and say, I think we can get there. Because that, we were getting there in previous years, and all the years I've been doing this, those were the easiest years. Was when local aid was growing. And it hasn't been growing since the recession. It hasn't. And to your point, Alex, you know, we are in a restorative budget. If we hadn't had to cut back then, we would have the Russell Street teacher that we want to meet the current staffing, or current student levels. They would have been there. And we would have been at like 21 or 22, and we would have gone to 23 or 24, you know, by having that person there. We've been at 25 or 26 because we let that person go, and now we're getting to critical mass where we think we're gonna go over. So I agree with you. That is we've all agreed, a level service concept to us. So we just need to see how it goes with it. Do you want to talk about the revolving funds? Do you want to do that right this second, or is there any other general discussion about what we talked about that came out of the meeting on Tuesday?
I think we're gonna, as a town, have to look at expanding the tools in our toolbox here and reaching for, whether it's adjusting OPEB or, dare I say, exploring the possibility of an override, or saying, no, we are content with not the ideal situation, and we're content with level staffing. We need to think about that as a town.
All right, Steve, Mark, and we'll put into the package when it gets posted online, the current revolving fund balances and projections. But Steve emailed them to you guys if you want to look at them electronically. They are up on the screen. So a couple things to note. Our circuit breaker number use for 2016, the current fiscal year, is 1.1 million, which is higher than we had projected when we voted the budget last spring. There was a fifth payment that came in after, you know, we went through the whole budget cycle. What that means in the immediate term is less reliance on school choice than we thought. We thought we were gonna have to do about 430,000 out of school choice. We won't have to do that much. It's gonna be more like 200 and something thousand.
Well, this model shows a little over 400,000.
400,000, okay.
So this model is reflecting that change?
Yes.
Okay. So it's still 401,000?
Yeah. So, you know, and I'm going to release this information to the Finance Committee has asked for this. Gary Wilson is here tonight. He's one of our liaisons. He's not our appointee, but when you get on the FinCom, then you get assigned a liaison to different committees, and Gary and Greg Schcmte are, this year, are too. I've had a couple meetings with them already to facilitate the communication and the distribution of information. And one of the things they wanted to take a look at was this, so I'm going to give that, I wanted us to talk about it first in this meeting. We should have done it last Thursday, got snowed out, so we're a week behind, but I will get this to them tomorrow. The thing I want to keep in mind is that, you know, when we talk about, so we're projecting that we're going to take in 2017 about $778,000 in circuit breaker. That will be expended in FY 2017. That's less than we took in last year. You know, we took in 1.1 million, so we're going to spend less. There's 478,000, almost 479,000 that we're projecting to take in school choice. Anything we spend beyond that out of choice puts us in a deficit situation, because that's about as much as we'll probably take in year by year going forward. So, you know, it's there, but we just got to be thinking about how much we're willing to tolerate use of relative to how much we think we're going to take in.
So Mike, I don't have a problem releasing the information, but there's a lot of information here. Some of these revolving funds have dedicated purposes that are not just general revenue that can be applied to any purpose. And I think the only one that has flexibility really is our use of the school choice funds.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
I just want to make sure that's clear.
The
that
other thing
when
to keep
people
in
look at
mind is
these
that the
numbers-
balances here that are shown in several of them are just based on timing.
Right.
When we take the money in versus when we actually spend it. There are some that are, you know, Tiger's Den, for instance, you know, we take in more than we spend year by year. And the budget subcommittee has had a discussion with the administration to think about that. But again, as you just said, there's a constraint there.
Right.
You can really only spend it on
Yeah, that's what I mean.
things that we use for Tiger's Den. We can't just grab it and say, oh, there's your classroom teacher in Russell Street.
Yeah, I just don't want people to misunderstand what they can do with this information.
Is restricted.
Yeah.
Funny money.
Yeah, no, and we've had that conversation
Good.
with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen, so nobody should be,
I just wanted to say it.
yeah.
I'd be glad to answer any questions if anybody has on the projections or the balances or what the specific funds are used for. I'd be more than glad to answer questions.
Again, this is showing good news. I mean, this is good news. We are in a healthy spot, and as Alex said, the goal, prior to the meeting the last 4 years, the goal was to build our reserves up in our revolving funds, and we did it. And we did it at the expense of opportunities to, grow the school district conceivably. But we thought it was the prudent thing to do, and we, made that decision in conjunction with the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, and, we did it. And that's why you see this, $832,000 in school choice. That's a good situation to be in. And we can certainly, and we have over the past several years, worked with those boards to, make decisions on what is a healthy use of those funds, and it's helped. It's helped the school district, and it's helped the town overall in their budgeting. And that's a good thing. I think, like you said, Darryl, I think we just got to be wary that it's not like this is open-ended and is just say, oh, well, there's 200,000, there's 130,000. That's not the case. That's not quite that simple.
Right.
And I just, the next level of discussion with the FinCom and the Board of Selectmen is going to be, how do we fund all of this? And when we want to talk about, well, you guys have some use of revolving funds, yes, we have some use of revolving funds that would work. But we don't have, it's not an open-ended proposition, and anything that goes beyond, spending beyond what we take in, puts us in a deficit situation that might be the right thing to do in the short term, but it has to be understood that it's only the short term, that it has to be able to be replaced at some point, All right. Any other questions or comments? Gary, anything you want?
No, after I look at the report, I'm going to have some questions probably tomorrow. But that helps explain quite a bit, the revolving account. We haven't got to look at the document at all, so it's...
Yeah, I'm more than glad to sit at any time with
All right, thank
you guys and answer questions.
All right, and I think that we'll get them that information, and then, there'll be discussions, and then I can't remember when the next joint meeting is, but it's coming. And believe it or not,
First week back from vacation.
yeah, and believe it or not, we're, not too far away from getting our presentation ready. And when do we have to vote it? Is it March or April?
March 23rd.
March 23rd.
So it's 6 weeks away. Not much time. 5 weeks. All right. Anything else on that? All right, we're on to new business.
Did you want to look at the capital plan? And
Oh, yes, thank you, sorry, I forgot about that.
Look at the
Yeah, there was
priority list.
discussion on that. Hold on.
In your package, you have our original list that we submitted and the list that was recommended at the last meeting we were at with the town.
Right, so off of, it's a way of explanation, if I may, Superintendent. So off of the original capital list, some of those items have been moved over to the PMBC column, which is not reflective in this.
Yeah,
It's a
that's what my
different
concern was.
worksheet, so really, if you look at the list that's on the screen, which is from the town report and the town recommendation, they're recommending $317,500 for school capital spending. Essentially, that was everything on the school list after we moved some items over to the PMBC, with the exception of we were looking to replace their school pickup truck and plow because it's getting up there in age. So that is not included in this list. And that's really the only thing that wasn't included in the town capital plan at this point in time. Just as way of explanation.
Yeah, could I ask that you add to the packet the extract out of the PMBC recommended list, just so it doesn't show that they deleted? I mean, the town was very, planning-wise, making sure they're taking care of as much of as the request as possible.
So, yeah, I just want to reiterate, so, sorry, Steve, I was looking at some of the things in here, I'm listening what happened here. So you're saying that out of the FY 2018 capital request list that we have in this packet, between what the finance team, the town finance team put in our capital bucket and between what on the PMBC bucket, the only thing on this list that didn't get done was the truck?
Yes, essentially, but some of the items from PMBC were moved possibly into next year, but possibly funded a couple of years out as well.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay,
so
so
like
not
the-
all of it's going to
It's
get.
not
on this
all
list.
next year.
Okay.
There was
But
a
like the,
multi-year plan by PMBC.
Right, like the window blinds, I think we phased, we were, this is back to our desire for planning, that
Right.
this caught us by surprise.
Okay.
So we asked, let's slide that a year so that
Okay.
it's not, not a reactive piece
Okay.
there, as well as I think there were some other, it looked like another school needed a similar type of treatment.
Yeah,
that
and
type of thing there.
I-
So we phased those in.
Okay.
That's why I'd like to try to include that in here, just so that
Right.
it's painting the rest of that picture.
Okay.
Yeah, well, we can put that in.
All right, so we'll do that, but, so everything is going, we think is going to get done?
Right, so-
And whether it's this year or the next, how far, 2 years out, beyond that? 2017, do you think, roughly?
It was, PMBC was a 3-year plan, I believe?
Yeah, so we split like the blinds like half each year,
Okay.
just to get it
So-
so that we could stabilize the
So, I
amount.
mean, that's good.
Type of thing there.
So, pretty, our capital request was pretty well met.
Yeah,
And if it wasn't met in this year, it's not that it's not gonna be met, it's,
right,
other than the truck.
right.
Other than the truck, and we'll probably include that in next year's list and see what happens, because our truck's getting pretty old, so.
And, I'll just comment, from the PMBC side, I think as we get the planning, better at the planning and the projections, it's a lot more receptive in terms of understanding where our needs are coming from, kind of thing there. Like, we talked about the door kicks, which was a surprise, but then when you added the clarification that during the lock retrofit, you found that they were rusted out, then it made sense of why we didn't anticipate that cost coming up, kind of thing there, and they readily put that into the higher priority bucket. So the planning is really helping, I think, in terms of how the process works through with the other people.
Yeah, and there are some other items that we had on some other, kind of some internal capital lists, and some of those, they were some energy projects, and some of those energy projects we're actually able to do through the town green community grant funding that the town is getting. So we're also working on energy projects for energy savings that will benefit the schools, but that's coming from state grant money through the town as well. So we're working on that as well, so. So multi-pronged approach to facilities here.
Very good. All right. I'll do it for budget tonight. Under new business, we have Littleton Group Home request.
Right. The Littleton Group Home has made a request to retool the group home and convert it into what they call a latency residential school for special education students that would serve students between the ages of 9 and 12. The capacity of the school would be approximately 12 students. So in essence, what this would mean is we would no longer have students attending our school district. We have a percentage, depends on the year, but we're finding a trend where more and more of the students that attend the group home end up going out of district. So we don't keep most of them within our schools anyway. I've coined a letter just saying that in theory, or in concept more correctly, we support the conversion to a latency residential home. There's a second process that needs to occur, and I just put in the letter that please be aware that there may be other stages in the process. If they actualize this home, they then would be required to have us look at their curricula and sign off on it to ensure that it at least meets our requirements. And so that would be a legal requirement that we could not do until they converted it and had a curriculum in place. I see no reason why not, why we wouldn't support this. In fact, supporting concept, you'd have to have a real compelling reason not to support the concept of conversion.
There's no action required on the school committee as part of this.
Well,
meeting.
if you want to take a vote, that would be fine. If not, I can just send a letter and we'll leave it at that.
I think it's perfectly appropriate for you to just send a letter. At this point, I think it's like you say, they have to go through their process, that something could happen. It doesn't sound like the group home is going away, it's just a question of repurposing. And if for some reason it didn't happen, they would probably keep their current model in place.
Right.
So let's just wait and see.
Okay. Sounds good.
All right, any other new business?
No, that's it, thank you.
We're at the second point in the agenda where we have input from interested citizens. Do we have any interest? If you do, just come up to the microphone, name and street, and fire away.
Right. Good evening. Justin McCarthy, 7 Stony Stream Lane. I attended a school committee meeting 8 months or so ago to express an interest in tuition-free full-day kindergarten, and was pleasantly surprised to learn that it was part of your budget proposal for FinCom. Attended your joint FinCom meeting with the Board of Selectmen, and then was disappointed to learn that it was low man on the totem pole. I understand that there are, some legal requirements within the school system that you have to fund some other requirements, and that might take precedent, but wanted to continue to advocate for the school system for tuition-free full-day kindergarten. There aren't many folks here tonight because it's those that would be most interested in this, I think, are probably have young families. They work today, they commute at home, dinner, read the kids' stories, put them to bed. So I did collect a whole slew of signatures, nothing official, but wanted to just share with you our support. And before I read the brief statement, also just wanted to ask you to consider possibly changing the way that the kindergarten program is run if it turns out that you're not going to get the proposed financing from the town. As it stands right now, I believe roughly 2/3 of all towns in Massachusetts have figured out a way to have tuition-free full-day kindergarten, and I think it's something like 87% of households in Littleton choose to pay for some portion of full-day kindergarten. That's because they want the very best education for their child. And, Superintendent Clenchey, to use your words, I think this is an area where we maybe fall victim to, catering towards that half-day program where all of the academics are in the morning, and these parents are spending, more than $4,000 a year, which is a true economic decision within a household, to send their child, and they get not the most ideal learning situation. So with that said, I just have this very brief statement, and I'll turn the signatures in to our chairman. We, the residents of Littleton, are in support of a tuition-free full-day kindergarten. Full-day kindergarten has many benefits: higher test scores, greater progress in social skills, higher self-esteem and independence. Full-day kindergarten has helped students achieve at a higher level long-term. All students should have guaranteed access to high-quality, publicly funded full-day kindergarten each day of the school week if they are to meet the learning and workforce challenges of the 21st century. That's according to the Children's Defense Fund, a national advocacy organization. Currently, Littleton parents are paying more than $4,000 a year, one of the highest costs in the state. This is a very large financial burden on many Littleton families, and prohibits children from attending. Approximately 262 districts in Massachusetts offer tuition-free kindergarten, and the town of Littleton should strive to provide the very best for our children as well. Our children deserve to be as prepared for their higher educational experience as their peers who come from other towns that already offer full-day kindergarten. The children of Littleton should be able to participate in an academically rich kindergarten program that includes extracurricular classes such as art, music, and gym. These signatures represent the residents of town who are in support of the proposed budget items before you in regards to the tuition-free full-day kindergarten.
Actually, just can I ask you a favor?
Yeah.
Rather than hand that in to us now, could you photocopy, scan it,
Sure.
and can you send it to us electronically?
Absolutely.
And also send it to the chairman of the Board of Selectmen and the chairman of the Finance Committee?
Okay.
Because
Not a problem.
those are your audiences in terms of, we support it, that's
Yeah.
why it was in our budget
Mention of the fire
request.
here.
Yep,
It's-
and I appreciate that.
You're not convincing us that we want to do this.
Right.
Right, I'm hoping to, if there's any way to move it up your,
Well, we appreciate
your
that,
agenda
certainly
items.
something, we get elected, you gotta make, decisions you don't otherwise really wanna make. But really, we would put it right in there and fund it. And in theory, anything that's being asked for by any of the towns, whether you phrase it as a mission budget or whatever it is, can be done.
Right.
The question is, not all of it can be done. How are we gonna make the decisions as a community? What do we wanna support? What are the priorities?
Sure.
And it is, and I emphasize the word community, because the community's gonna have to make a decision about, where does full-day kindergarten fall into with all the other things. The fire chief made a very compelling argument for why a fully staffed EMT department would work in Littleton. The police chief made a very valid argument about why his, staffing increases would benefit the town. Nobody's asking for anything that wouldn't benefit the town. The question is, what can we do? So getting it into the overall discussion about the overall budget is very important. So
Sure.
I would appreciate it if you did it that way. That'd be great. I'd really appreciate you taking the time and effort to get people organized to.
Not a problem. When I attended the tri-board meeting, I was hoping there was an opportunity for interested citizens, and I wasn't able to speak that
You can always
night,
wave your
so-
hand and see what they do.
All right, well, thanks for your time. I guess just in closing, if it doesn't move forward,
Yeah.
I'd ask you to take a look at the way the kindergarten program's restructured, because I think you can do that without spending any money, and just those parents that are paying for something, we all like to get what you pay for. So if there was a way to rework the program, I think that would be ideal.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that obviously full-day kindergarten has become something that's bubbled up higher up onto our list of priorities, whether it's, going tuition-free and/or how we deliver the services that program is, whether it's tuition-free or not.
And, sorry, go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, you.
I was gonna say is we've looked at it also, and, you read in the papers about state money that's available to fund some of the first-year pieces of it. Littleton's current demographic and economics, we don't qualify for any of that state part of the transition to full-day care,
Right.
kindergarten there. So as people read other communities doing it and getting state grants to help them with it, our determination is we don't qualify for those state grants. So just in terms of background context for that.
Well, keep fighting the fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a question and then a comment. How many signatures did you get?
I think there's about 60 there.
Okay, wow.
If you wanted
I'm sure.
500, we could make it happen.
Yeah, I'm sure. And I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And it's something that we've talked about for, as Mike said, for a couple of years. We were looking at it as part of the budget subcommittee and looking at what other towns are doing. And Littleton right now is, I think there are only 3 towns that charge more than Littleton, or 2 towns that charge more than Littleton in the state for full-day kindergarten. And the trend has been slowly over time, and there was a lot more state money a while ago, and it's dried up. And those communities that do compete for it are usually less economically successful
Sure.
than Littleton is, so we naturally would not get that benefit. In terms of organizing, I do think the focus is the other boards. I mean, it's something that we care about and we want, but I think it is well, you went to the meeting the other night, I don't need to tell
Right.
you the work that needs to be done. About restructuring the program without changing the fee, the concern there would be if you were to spread, for example, the academics out throughout the day, so that people are getting the bang for their buck when they pay the $4,000 plus for the full day, that they're getting some academic content. The concern with doing that is then if you aren't in a position where that's a decision you feel you can make as a family, your child is behind on that core academic content.
I'm
Maybe
not
I
sure how it would
misunderstood.
work with staffing.
Mhm.
It's probably a lot more complicated than I think it is, but I was maybe thinking that there would be one half-day program, one class of half-day kids.
Oh, I
And if
see.
there's 5 kindergarten classes, then it'd be 4 classes of full-day kids. So the half-day kids would get all the academics in the morning, and the 4 other classes would get them spread out with the extracurriculars mixed in throughout the day. And that
I wasn't sure what
probably-
you were talking about
and
restructuring,
that
I'm
probably
sure.
means that you've got
Yeah.
different teachers teaching at different times, and it probably isn't that simple.
Well, if we had an extra couple classrooms, maybe.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
But actually, just Kelly, before he walks off, where's the appropriate interface point within the system if they have alternate ideas that they wanted to talk about? Because this isn't always the right form.
No, it would be principal parity. We have many discussions about kindergarten, and one of the things Littleton did years ago, and was very progressive, was give parents the opportunity to hop into a 1 afternoon, 2 afternoon, 3 afternoon. It was quite creative. And we've been reviewing that process, and whatever we do, we want to make sure that we're meeting everybody's needs.
Sure.
Whatever that looks like, and we're trying to ascertain what that actually means. One thing that I just wanted to, as a side comment, when we talk about state funding, we have to be really cautious. I've worked with so many funding models in my career. I wish I'd hadn't, but Littleton is about Steve, correct me if it's gone down, but about a 23% receiver, which means that 23% of our funds, Chapter 70 funds, come from the state, and then the rest comes from other sources, other revenue sources. And that percentage is determined by the wealth of the community. And the state determines the wealth of the community, not us. So you always have to remember that, in essence, we're getting 20 cents on the dollar when we start a new venture. And that's the cold reality, so to speak, of funding.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, subcommittee reports. TNBC?
A lot of focus has been on the fire station lately. I think as well as the other things there. I think, and then I touched on our budget planning pieces there, so I think that's probably about all for tonight.
Yeah, I think budget subcommittee, that we covered all our territory. How about the roll us right to policy subcommittee?
Any update on alumni? In terms of
Just generally speaking, so we did have a meeting last week for the first time in quite a while. Gale Associates was there. We went over some design element decisions, for instance, how many lines in sports did we want to stripe on the field? There was a discussion about the bleachers relative to where the light poles go, and did we want to center it, or how did we want to do this? So we went over a few things like that. Really, though, now the goal of Gale Associates is to get the bid package ready, and that requires interfacing with the Conservation Commission. They're actually at the Planning Board tonight. Entities like that, and they got to get the details down on how they're going to handle irrigation, groundwater treatment, et cetera, et cetera. So they're going through all of that process, which they are perfectly capable of doing. They don't need any AFRAC members holding their hands. And the goal is to get the bid package out in March, get the bids evaluated and awarded, and once they hire a contractor, they will talk about how to go ahead and start the process of building it. The goal is to start on or around May 1st and finish on or around September 1st. We can't talk about the process for doing the construction while school is in session until we get the contractor hired, until we get them hired. There was discussion at the AFRAC meeting about, that's important, and they're like, yep, we know it. Every contractor knows that they're going to have to work with the community to, meet safety concerns, and yet they always do it, and these projects do start in spring and get finished in summer. Otherwise, they would never get done, or they would have to get done over 2 summers, because it's a 4-month thing. It's not going to get done any short time. So that process will unfold once the contractor gets hired. A lot of the decisions were deferred to the athletic director or Park and Rec, because they're the ones who are going to be the users and maintainers of the facility. So there were no real significant decisions made, just little elements like that. But the process is unfolding, it's on schedule. They don't feel like there's any reason why they can't make that, as of right now, the May 1st to September 1st. The athletic director will be putting contingency plans in place. He might schedule the first 2 games of the football season away. And he will definitely have a backup plan if he can't play a season at all, which could happen, then he would have a backup plan to go to the Neshoba Tech or Air Shirley or wherever to play the home games. Field hockey, which would be the other big consumer of that facility in the fall, would just play at the high school again if they had to, if they couldn't get on the field during this next upcoming season. There's no reason to think that it wouldn't be ready for the lacrosse programs in the following spring from now.
That's great. Thank you.
No, and PMBC, sorry, that's the other big body that's been meeting with Gale Associates too. All right. Policy?
Yeah, so just finishing up that first batch of policies, just for a second reading, we've already discussed it, no changes, except for the little notation with the day at the bottom, which will change again after we hopefully approve the policy tonight. So thank you for that, Daryl. And then at the next meeting, we'll introduce the next batch.
You owe me 4 years of candy here. That's part too, you know?
That's true. I have been slacking on that.
Do we need a motion for the second reading?
Yes. Yep. I'll do it. Motion for second reading of the following reviewed policies: BA, BDFA, BE, BEC, BEDD, BEDF, BEDG, BEDH, BG, BGB, BGG, BHC, BIA, BIBA, BID, BK, and BJ.
Second.
Yeah, better second.
So I owe you 4 years.
Make sure you had all those letters right.
You owe me 3 years of beatboxing.
Motion is made and seconded. Is there any discussion on these policies? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Alex. Any other business? I don't think we need executive session tonight. We'll just adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, sir.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, LCTV. And we'll see you guys March 2nd.